My husband said the affair was over. Then Brenda texted, "I can't share you anymore." So, I met her. I didn't plan to become the kind of wife people whisper about after a divorce. I didn't plan to do something cruel just because I was tired of being humiliated. I used to think revenge was for people who couldn't control themselves. Then I found myself sitting on the bathroom floor in our house in St. Louis, holding my husband's phone with both hands, reading a message from the woman he swore he had blocked. Her name was Brenda Hill. The first time I saw her name, it didn't feel important. She was a manager at a company Mark sometimes worked with. My husband, Mark Johnson, was a salesman, so his phone was always full of people I didn't know. Clients, managers, vendors, contractors, old customers. He was always taking calls, always answering texts, always saying, "That's just sales, Amy. If I ignore people, I lose money." And I believed him because I didn't want to become suspicious for no reason. I was an accountant. I liked proof. I liked numbers. I liked things that made sense on paper. If something didn't add up, I noticed. That was how I found out the first time. A hotel charge. Not lipstick on his shirt. Not perfume. Not some dramatic movie moment. Just one charge on our credit card statement from a hotel in Indianapolis. Mark had told me he was driving there for a sales conference and coming back the same night. He complained about the drive before he left. He said he hated those events because it was all fake smiling and bad coffee. I packed him a turkey sandwich, trail mix, and 2 bottles of water because I was still the kind of wife who worried about him getting tired on the road. So when I saw the hotel charge 2 days later, I just stared at it. Mark was standing at the sink, eating leftovers from a container, still in his work shirt. He looked normal. Too normal. I said, "Why is there a hotel charge from Indianapolis?" He didn't pause. He said, "A client's company card didn't work." I covered the room. "They're reimbursing me." That lie came out so smoothly that I almost felt embarrassed for asking. I said, "You paid for a client's hotel room?" He shrugged. "It happens. Sales gets messy." I wanted to believe him. That's the part one still hate admitting. I wanted to believe him so badly that my own brain started helping him. Maybe I didn't understand his job. Maybe it really was normal. Maybe I was being paranoid because life had been stressful and we had been distant lately. So I said, "Okay." Mark walked over, kissed the top of my head, and said, "This is why I love you. You don't make everything dramatic." That sentence stayed with me. 2 nights later, Mark fell asleep on the couch. Buddy, our older dog, was snoring near his feet. Maggie, our younger one, was curled against my leg. I was picking up empty glasses from the coffee table when I saw Mark's old tablet sitting beside the lamp. We barely used it anymore. I only opened it because I thought I might check the weather for the next morning. That was the innocent version. The truth is, some part of me already knew. His messages were still synced. I didn't have to search for anything. Brenda's name was right there. At first, I only saw short messages. "I miss you. I hate leaving you." She has no idea. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. Then I saw the one that made my hands go numb. "You make me feel alive again." I remember staring at those words until they stopped looking like English. Alive again. Like I had been slowly killing him by being his wife. Like the grocery lists, mortgage payments, dog appointments, work stress, laundry, dinners, and quiet evenings we built together were some kind of prison he needed rescuing from. I read more than I should have. I know people always say not to torture yourself with details, but when you find out your life has a hidden version, you need to see how deep it goes. It had been going on for months. They met during work lunches. Then drinks. Then a hotel room in Indianapolis during the sales conference he told me was boring. He had sent her pictures from our backyard. He had complained about me. He had told her I was cold. He had told her we were basically roommates. He had told her he didn't know how to leave because I was too fragile. I was sitting 10 feet away from him while he slept with his mouth slightly open, looking like a harmless, tired husband. I wanted to throw the tablet at his face. I wanted to scream until the neighbors called someone. Instead, I put the tablet down, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and threw up. The next morning, I confronted him before work. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't print screenshots. I just stood in the kitchen while he poured coffee and said, "How long have you been sleeping with Brenda?" The mug slipped in his hand. Coffee spilled onto the counter. He said, "What?" I said, "Don't make me say it again." For about 5 seconds, I watched him decide whether to keep lying. I could see it happen on his face. Then he broke. He sat down at the kitchen table and started crying. Not a few tears. Crying. Shaking. Covering his face. Saying my name over and over like he was the one who had been wounded. "Amy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was stupid. It was nothing. I ended it. I swear I ended it." I said, "You slept with her in Indianapolis." He nodded without looking at me. I said, "And you came home and let me unpack your bag." He cried harder. I hated him in that moment. I also wanted him to hold me. That is the most humiliating part of being betrayed by someone you love. Your body still reaches for the person who hurt you. Mark gave me every excuse people give when they want forgiveness without earning it. He said he was stressed. He said sales had been bad. He said he felt invisible. He said Brenda made him feel admired. He said it was physical. He said it didn't mean anything. He said he loved me. He said he never meant to destroy us. I asked, why didn't you just leave? He said, because I don't want to lose you. I laughed then. Not because anything was funny. It just came out sharp and ugly. You didn't want to lose me, I said. You just wanted me at home while you had her somewhere else. He dropped to his knees beside my chair and grabbed my hands. I pulled away, but not fast enough. I still remember how warm his hands were. I'll do anything, he said. Passwords. Counseling. Whatever you want. I'll block her right now. He blocked Brenda in front of me. He deleted her number. He handed me his phone. He gave me the password to everything. He even called my mother, Helen, and apologized. That part still makes me cringe. My mother had worked as a cashier for years and believed most problems could be fixed with patience, prayer, and someone deciding to be humble. She cried on the phone and told me, marriage is hard, Amy. I'm not saying what he did is okay. But if he is truly sorry, don't make decisions while you're broken. My father, Gary, was quieter. He was a mechanic, the kind of man who usually fixed things instead of talking about feelings. All he said was, come home if you need to. Anytime. My older sister, Carol Wilson Anderson, was different. She was a dentist and had always been more direct than the rest of us. When I told her, she went silent first. Then she said, do you want comfort or do you want honesty? I said, both. She said, comfort is that you didn't deserve this. Honesty is that if you stay, you need to understand you're choosing a man who already knows how to lie to your face. I hated that because it sounded too clean, too easy, like leaving was just a door you walked through. But leaving a marriage is not just packing a bag. It is admitting the person you defended to everyone made a fool out of you. It is looking at your house, your dogs, your family photos, your shared calendar, your half-paid bills, and realizing all of it now has a crack through it. So I stayed. Not because I was weak. At least I don't think so. I stayed because I wanted the life I thought I had. I wanted Mark to become the man he kept promising he was. I wanted the affair to be a terrible chapter, not the title of the whole book. We started seeing Diane Lewis, a marriage coach in St. Louis. She wasn't a therapist, and she made that clear in the first session. She said she helped couples communicate and decide whether they could rebuild trust. Mark nodded like a student trying to impress a teacher. In those sessions, he was perfect. He said all the right things. I betrayed Amy. I was selfish. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I need to rebuild safety. Diane would ask me how I felt, and sometimes I couldn't even answer. I felt angry. I felt stupid. I felt jealous. I felt like Brenda was sitting between us even when her name wasn't spoken. After the sessions, Mark would take me to lunch or coffee and act gentle. He asked before touching me. He sent me pictures from work. He called when he was driving. He left his phone face up on the table like a man proving innocence. For a while, I thought maybe we were improving. I cooked dinner again. Not every night, but sometimes. We walked Buddy and Maggie around the neighborhood after work. Mark started coming home earlier. He stopped going out for drinks with clients unless he told me first. He brought flowers once, and I hated that I liked them. There were still moments that hurt. If his phone buzzed, my chest tightened. If he smiled while texting, my stomach turned. If he said he had a late meeting, I became someone I didn't recognize. Calm on the outside, burning on the inside. One night, I asked him, do you miss her? He looked almost offended. No, he said. I miss who I thought I was with her. That's not the same thing. I wanted that answer to comfort me. Instead, it made me wonder how many versions of himself he had and which one I had married. For months passed like that. For months of trying. For months of pretending progress was the same as healing. For months of me swallowing questions because I didn't want to be called obsessive. For months of Mark saying, I know I hurt you, whenever I cried, but still looking tired when I needed reassurance. Then came the Friday night that ended whatever chance we had left. Mark had 2 beers after dinner and fell asleep on the couch. It was normal. Almost boring. I was folding laundry in the living room while a crime show played low on the TV. Buddy was stretched out by the doorway, and Maggie kept stealing socks from the basket. Mark's phone was on the coffee table. It lit up. No name. Just a number. I froze. I told myself not to touch it. I told myself if I picked it up, I was choosing suspicion. I told myself we were rebuilding, and rebuilding meant not acting like a detective every time his phone moved. Then the screen lit up again. The preview said, I can't share you anymore. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I picked up the phone. My hands were steady, which scared me more than shaking would have. Mark had given me his password months ago, and he had never changed it. Maybe he thought that made him safe. Maybe he thought I had stopped checking. I opened the message thread. It was Brenda. Not under her name. Not saved as a contact. Just a number. But it was her. I knew because of the way she wrote, the same little phrases from the old messages, the same needy confidence. And Mark had never stopped. He had blocked her real number in front of me, then started using a different one. He had deleted threads. He had taken calls in his car. He had told her the marriage coaching was for appearances. He told her I was calmer now, but still fragile. He told her leaving me too fast would make him look cruel. He told her he missed her. He told her he thought about her when he was lying next to me. Then I saw the message that made something inside me go quiet. Brenda had written, "She must be so pathetic if she's still trying after everything." And Mark replied, "She doesn't know how to let go." I sat there with his phone in my hand while he slept beside me. She doesn't know how to let go. That was what my forgiveness looked like from the outside. Not grace. Not strength. Not love. Pathetic. I didn't wake him up. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I locked myself in the bathroom and read everything. There were messages from the week we started marriage coaching. Messages from the day he brought me flowers. Messages from the night he held me in bed while I cried and promised me there was no one else. He had been comforting me with one hand and texting her with the other. By the time I finished reading, I wasn't crying anymore. I felt empty. Not peaceful. Not healed. Empty in a dangerous way. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee. I fed Buddy and Maggie. I asked Mark if he wanted eggs. He looked relieved, like he could sense the house felt lighter, but didn't know why. He came up behind me while I stood at the stove and kissed my shoulder. "You seem good today," he said. I turned the eggs with a spatula and said, "Maybe I just slept well." He smiled. "I love seeing you like this." I almost laughed. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him was not the same wife who went to bed the night before. That evening, after he left to help his brother Kevin with a small carpentry job, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. For 10 minutes, I stared at Brenda Hill's profile. I didn't know what I was going to say. I only knew I was done letting Mark be the only person who controlled the story. So I typed one message. "I know you're still talking to my husband. I'm not here to scream. I want to know what he told you." I hovered over send until my finger started to hurt. Then I clicked it. Brenda didn't answer for almost 3 hours. When her reply finally came, it was short. "I don't think this is a good idea." I stared at it and felt something bitter rise in my chest. I wrote back, "Probably not." But neither was sleeping with my husband. That was the moment the door opened. And once it opened, none of us walked out clean. Brenda didn't answer right away after that. I watched the message sit there, delivered but unread, then read but unanswered. Mark came home while I was still at the kitchen table, and I closed my laptop so fast he noticed. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Bills," I said. He smiled a little. "Fun night." "Yeah," I said. "Living the dream." He walked behind my chair and rubbed my shoulders. A few months earlier, that would have made me lean back into him without thinking. That night, every part of me went stiff. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired." He kissed the top of my head and went upstairs to shower. I sat there listening to the water run through the pipes, wondering how many times he had kissed me like that after messaging her. My laptop chimed 20 minutes later. Brenda had replied. "What exactly do you want from me?" I stared at the screen. I wanted a lot of things. I wanted her to feel ashamed. I wanted her to tell me I was prettier, better, more loved. I wanted her to confirm Mark was a liar, then somehow also confirm I still had something worth saving. None of that made sense, but betrayal does not make you logical. It makes you hungry for details that only make the wound deeper. I typed, "I want to know what he told you about me." She replied faster this time. "He told me your marriage was basically over." I laughed under my breath. "Of course." I wrote, "Funny. He told me you were nothing." Her reply came almost instantly. "He said he couldn't leave yet because you were unstable." There it was again. Fragile. Unstable. Pathetic. The words changed, but the shape of them was the same. Mark had turned my pain into his excuse. I wrote, "Did he tell you he was in marriage coaching with me?" She said, "He said it was something he had to do so you wouldn't fall apart." My hands went cold. I thought about Diane Lewis's office. The soft gray couch. The box of tissues on the small table. Mark leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, saying, "I need to rebuild safety for Amy." I remembered believing him because his voice sounded broken. Now I could see the other side. After every session, he probably went to his car and told Brenda I was still too damaged to release him. I wrote, "Did he tell you he blocked you?" She said, "He blocked my old number because you were watching." I didn't answer for a minute. Then she wrote again. "Look, I'm not proud of any of this." That made me angry. I wrote, "You called me pathetic." There was a long pause. Then she said, "I was angry." I wrote, "At me." She said, "At the situation." I stared at that. The situation. As if the situation was weather. As if it happened to all of us instead of being chosen, message by message, lie by lie. I wrote, "You knew he was married." She replied, "He told me you two were done emotionally." I wrote, "He was still sleeping in my bed." She didn't answer. That silence felt like the first honest thing she had given me. For the next few days, I did something I still don't know how to explain without sounding obsessed. I kept talking to her. At first, I told myself I was collecting information. I wanted dates. I wanted proof. I wanted to know how long the second phone number had been going on. I wanted to know whether they had met again after he swore it was over. But it became more than that. Every time Brenda answered a question, another one opened behind it. What did he say after our first marriage coaching session? Did he mention my sister Carol? Did he make fun of my mother Helen for telling me forgiveness mattered? Did he talk about our dogs? Did he say my name when he was with her? Some questions I asked. Some I swallowed because I still had a little pride left. During the day, I went to work and pretended to be normal. I sat at my desk in the accounting office, reviewed invoices, answered emails, and nodded when Laura Thomas from the bank branch downstairs stopped by to ask if I wanted coffee. Laura wasn't my best friend, but she was kind. She had that banker calmness, always neat, always careful with words. She noticed something was wrong. One afternoon she stood beside my desk and said, "You look like you haven't slept in a week." I said, "Marriage stuff." She winced. "Bad marriage stuff?" I gave a small laugh. "Is there another kind?" She didn't push, but she said, "If you ever need a cover story, use me. Women should have emergency cover stories." At the time, I laughed because I thought she was joking. Later, I would use her name so easily it scared me. At home, Mark acted like a man in recovery. That was the worst part. He was being sweet again. He cooked dinner twice that week. He folded laundry wrong but proudly. He sent me a picture of his lunch from work like proof he was where he said he was. Every sweet thing he did made me angrier. Because now I knew none of it meant anything. Mark could look gentle while lying. He could say, "I love you," and still keep a secret thread alive. He could sit in Diane Lewis's office and talk about accountability, then tell Brenda I was too broken to let him leave. One night, we sat across from each other eating chicken and rice. Mark asked, "Do you think we're getting better?" I looked at him. He looked hopeful. Tired. Almost innocent. I said, "Do you?" He nodded. "I feel like we are. I know there's still work. But you seem calmer." There was that word again. Calmer. Like my pain was the problem. Like the goal was not truth, but silence. I said, "Maybe I'm just done reacting." He reached across the table for my hand. I let him take it. "That means a lot," he said. I wanted to ask if Brenda knew he was holding my hand. I wanted to ask if he would text her later and say I was making progress. Instead, I squeezed his fingers once and pulled away. That night, Brenda messaged me first. "He told me you never really loved him. Is that true?" I read it 3 times. Then I wrote, "I packed his lunch the morning he drove to Indianapolis to sleep with you." She replied, "He said you were cold to him." I wrote, "I was tired." "There's a difference." She said, "He said you treated him like a paycheck." I looked around our living room. The couch I picked out. The blanket Maggie chewed at the corner. The framed photo from our 5th anniversary. The house I helped pay for. The life I managed while Mark played wounded somewhere else. I wrote, "I treated him like a husband." That was the first time Brenda apologized. Not a good apology. Not enough. But she wrote, "I'm sorry. I think he lied to both of us." I hated that sentence because it pulled us closer when I wanted to keep hating her cleanly. The next day, she told me more. Mark had said I used my anxiety to control him. Mark had said I didn't want him physically. Mark had said he stayed because he was afraid of looking like the bad guy. Mark had said Brenda understood him in a way I never had. I wanted to hate her for believing him. But part of me understood it. Mark was good at being wounded. He could make you feel cruel for noticing what he did. He could take the knife out of your back and ask why you were bleeding on the floor. By the 4th day of messaging, Brenda and I were no longer just exchanging facts. We were comparing versions of him. She told me he liked to say, "You make me feel like myself again." I told her he said the same thing after I helped him through a bad quarter at work. She told me he said I made him feel small. I told her he once said I was the only person who made him feel safe. She said, "Maybe he says whatever keeps the woman in front of him from leaving." I hated her for saying something so true. That Friday, Mark told me he had to meet a client after work. "Who?" I asked. He looked up from tying his shoes. "A contractor named Pete. He's looking at a flooring package for a restaurant." Pete. I almost laughed because the lie was so boring. "What restaurant?" I asked. He hesitated half a second too long. "I don't know if it has a name yet." I nodded. "Okay." He studied my face. "You're not upset?" "No," I said. "Have fun with Pete." After he left, I messaged Brenda. "Is he meeting you?" She replied, "No. He told me he had to have dinner with you." I sat on the bed and felt something settle in me. He was not even with her. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It meant he was lying to both of us at the same time for reasons neither of us fully understood. Maybe there was another woman. Maybe he was drinking alone. Maybe he just wanted a life where no one knew where he was. Brenda wrote, "Can we meet?" I looked at the message for a long time. Every smart version of me said no. The accountant in me said nothing good came from sitting across from your husband's affair partner. The wife in me wanted to see her face. The wounded part of me wanted to know if she would look ashamed. I wrote, "Why?" She said, "Because I don't think either of us knows the truth. And I'm tired of hearing it through him." I should have said no. Instead, I said, "Tomorrow." We chose a wine bar in St. Louis, far enough from my neighborhood that I didn't expect to run into anyone, but not so far that it felt dramatic. I told Mark I was going out with Laura after work. He smiled like he was proud of me. "That's good," he said. "You should get out more." I looked at him tying his tie in the mirror and thought, you have no idea where I'm going. The wine bar was dim and narrow, with small round tables and candles that smelled like vanilla. I arrived 10 minutes early because anxiety makes me punctual. I sat with my back to the wall and watched every woman who walked in. When Brenda entered, I knew immediately. She looked different from what I had built in my head. She was not glamorous. Not evil-looking. Not some perfect seductress with a cruel smile. She was a woman in a dark green blouse, holding her purse too tightly, scanning the room like she might run. She saw me and stopped. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then she walked over. "Amy?" she asked. I hated the sound of my name in her mouth. "Brenda," I said. She sat down across from me. A server came over too quickly and asked what we wanted. Brenda ordered white wine. I ordered red, even though I barely wanted it. Neither of us spoke until the server left. Then Brenda said, "You're prettier than he made you sound." I blinked. "That's your opener?" She looked embarrassed. "Sorry. That came out wrong." "It really did." She nodded and looked down at her hands. "I'm nervous. You slept with my husband. I'm not sure I'm worried about your comfort." Her face tightened, but she didn't argue. "Fair," she said. For the first 20 minutes, it was ugly. Not loud. Just sharp. She said Mark told her the marriage was dead. I said dead marriages don't usually include shared groceries and marriage coaching. She said he seemed miserable. I said married men having affairs often perform misery well. She said she didn't owe me loyalty. I said basic decency would have been nice. Then she said, "You think I didn't lose anything?" I looked at her. "Did you?" Her eyes shined, but she didn't cry. "I lost my dignity," she said. "And I know you probably think I didn't have any to begin with." I didn't answer. She took a breath. "I know I'm not the victim here. Not the way you are. But he did lie to me too." I wanted to reject that. I wanted the world to stay simple. Me as the wife. Her as the other woman. Mark as the cheating husband. 3 neat roles. But nothing about that table felt neat. She told me she had known Mark years ago through work. She said he reached out after a conference, saying he felt trapped and lonely. She said he never said he was happily married. He said we lived like roommates. He said I cared more about bills than him. He said I made him feel guilty for wanting affection. I said, "He told me you chased him." She gave a bitter little smile. "Of course he did." I said, "He told you I was fragile. He told me you'd hurt yourself if he left too fast." That made me go still. Brenda noticed. "Was that not true?" "No," I said. "That was never true." Her face changed. For the first time, she looked genuinely sick. "Amy, I didn't know that part was a lie." I believed her. I didn't want to, but I did. There is a specific kind of cruelty in a man using a woman's imaginary breakdown to justify his cowardice. He had made me sound unstable enough to trap him, weak enough to pity, pathetic enough to mock. I said, "He made me smaller so you wouldn't feel guilty." Brenda looked down at her glass. "He made you smaller so he wouldn't have to choose." That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said. We ordered another round. I know how that sounds. I know people will say that was the mistake. Maybe it was. But at the time, leaving felt impossible. I had spent months imagining Brenda as a shadow in my marriage, and now she was sitting across from me with tired eyes and a shaking voice, telling me the man I loved had built 2 different cages and called both of them love. The conversation softened after that. Not forgiving. Not friendly exactly. But less like 2 women fighting over a man and more like 2 women realizing the man had been the poison in both rooms. She asked, "Do you still love him?" I hated how quickly my eyes burned. "Yes," I said. "That's what makes it disgusting." She nodded slowly. "I think I loved who he pretended to be." I said, "Same." For a while, neither of us spoke. The wine bar had music playing low, some soft song I didn't recognize. People around us were laughing, leaning close, touching hands over tables. Normal people having normal nights. Brenda said, "He told me you never looked at him like you wanted him." I looked at her. "And did you?" She swallowed. I thought I did. That answer should have made me angry. Instead, it made me tired. I said, "I don't know what he wanted." A wife? A girlfriend? A victim? An audience? Brenda whispered, maybe just a mirror. I looked at her then, really looked at her. She was not prettier than me in a way that explained anything. She was not younger. She was not magic. She was just available for a version of Mark that I had never been offered. And I think that realization broke the last clean piece of my anger. Because if she had been some impossible woman, maybe I could have understood the risk. But she was human. Messy. Lonely. Flattered by his lies. Just like I had been. The server came by and asked if we wanted the check. Brenda looked at me. I should have said yes. I should have stood up, gone home, packed Mark's things, and called Carol. I should have let that night become the moment I reclaimed my dignity. Instead, I said, one more. Brenda didn't smile. She just nodded. The next hour is harder to explain because it felt like grief changing shape. We talked about the first time Mark lied to each of us. We talked about how good he was at making silence feel like peace. We talked about how humiliating it was to miss someone who had treated you like an option. Then Brenda reached across the table and touched my hand. It was not dramatic. Not like a movie. Just her fingers resting lightly over mine. I'm sorry, she said. Not enough. I know. But I am. I looked down at her hand. Every reasonable thought in me went quiet. I didn't move away. Not because I forgave her. Not because I suddenly wanted her in some clean romantic way. It was darker than that. Sadder. I wanted to take something back from the story. I wanted to ruin the secret Mark had built. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have the two people in his lie become real without his permission. I also wanted to feel chosen by the person he had chosen over me. That is the ugliest truth. When we left the wine bar, I told myself I was just making sure she got home safe. Brenda's apartment was 10 minutes away. I followed her in my car, hands locked on the steering wheel, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. At a red light, I almost turned around. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Hope you're having fun with Laura. Love you. I stared at it until the light changed. Love you. I followed Brenda home. Brenda lived in a small apartment building on the south side of St. Louis, not far from a strip of restaurants and old brick storefronts. Her place was cleaner than I expected. That is such a strange detail to remember, but I remember it clearly. A gray couch. A narrow kitchen. A framed print above the table. A candle burning on the counter that smelled like cedar. I stood just inside the door and thought, this is where he came when he told me he was working late. I looked around and hated every normal thing about it. Brenda set her purse on a chair and said, "Do you want water?" I almost laughed. It was such a regular question for such an ugly night. I said no. She nodded, then stood there like she didn't know what to do with her hands. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You don't have to stay." I said, "I know." She looked at me carefully. "Amy, I mean it. This doesn't have to become anything else." That was the moment I could have left. That was the clean exit. That was the last place where I could have still told myself I had only gone there for answers. But my phone buzzed again. Mark. Are you still up? I'm heading to bed soon. I stared at the message and felt something in me twist. He was home in our bed, pretending to be the patient husband. Pretending to be the man giving me space. Pretending he was not still calling another woman pathetic with Brenda behind my back. Pretending he had not turned my forgiveness into a joke. I typed back, yes. Still out. Then I placed my phone face down on Brenda's counter. She watched me do it. "Amy," she said quietly. I looked at her. "Don't." She didn't ask what I meant. I think she knew. I am not going to describe that night like it was beautiful. It wasn't. It was not some empowering moment where I found myself. It was grief wearing someone else's perfume. It was anger with a locked door behind it. It was two women making a choice that we both knew would hurt someone, maybe everyone. And I made that choice. I went home before sunrise. The streets were almost empty. St. Louis looked gray and cold through my windshield. My makeup felt heavy on my face. My mouth was dry. My hands smelled faintly like Brenda's soap from when I washed them in her bathroom. I remember sitting in my car outside my own house for several minutes, unable to go in. Buddy barked once from inside, then Maggie started too. That sound nearly broke me. My dogs were happy I was home. They didn't know I had just crossed a line I would never be able to uncross. When I walked in, Mark was asleep upstairs. His shoes were by the door. His jacket was hanging on the chair, not the hook, because he always did that and I always moved it for him. I stood there looking at his jacket like it belonged to a stranger. I didn't move it. I showered. I scrubbed my skin too hard. Then I lay beside him in bed without touching him. When he woke up a few hours later, he rolled toward me and said, "Good night." I stared at the ceiling. "Yeah," I said. "Interesting." He laughed softly, still half asleep. "Laura get wild?" I turned my face toward him. Something like that. He didn't notice my voice. Or maybe he did and chose not to. Mark had become very good at accepting the version of reality that benefited him. For 2 days, I said nothing. That was worse than screaming would have been. I went through the weekend like a ghost with a schedule. I fed the dogs. I folded laundry. I answered an email from my mother. I ignored one from Carol because I knew my sister would hear the wrongness in me immediately. Mark acted relaxed. Almost pleased. Maybe he thought my night out had made me easier to live with. Maybe he thought I had finally started becoming the healed, quiet wife he kept telling everyone I was. On Sunday evening, we ate dinner at the kitchen table. Nothing fancy. Pasta, salad, garlic bread from the freezer. The kind of meal I used to make when I wanted us to feel normal. Mark was talking about work. Something about a difficult client and a shipment delay. I watched his mouth move and thought about how many times that same mouth had said my name to Brenda. How many times it had lied to me. How many times it had kissed my forehead like a blessing after betraying me. Then his phone lit up beside his plate. He looked down. His face changed. Not a lot. Just enough. I knew before he said anything. Brenda had sent him one message. I didn't have to read it, but he picked up the phone too fast, and I saw the screen anyway. Your wife knows everything, and you should ask her where she was Friday night. The kitchen went silent. Mark stared at the message. Then he looked at me. For the first time in months, he looked truly scared. What is this? He asked. I took a sip of water. My hand did not shake. You should ask Brenda. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. What did you do, Amy? There it was. Not, what did I do? Not, how much do you know? Not, I'm sorry. His first instinct was still to make me the emergency. I looked at him and said I met her. His face went pale. You met Brenda? Yes. Why? I laughed once. You're asking me why I met the woman you kept lying to me about? He pointed at the phone. What does she mean? Where were you Friday night? I could have lied. I could have made him beg for the answer. I could have dragged it out the way he dragged me through months of fake forgiveness. But I didn't want a slow reveal. I wanted the bomb to go off. So I said I was with her. His mouth opened, then closed. What does that mean? I leaned back in my chair. It means I let her choose me. For a second, he didn't understand. Then he did. Something ugly moved across his face. You're disgusting, he said. The words came out fast. Too fast. Like he had been waiting for permission to hate me. I nodded. Maybe. You slept with her? I didn't answer. He stepped back like I had touched him with something dirty. You're sick, he said. You're actually sick. I felt the first crack in my calm. Not guilt exactly. Rage. You don't get to say that to me like you're innocent. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the silverware jumped. Buddy barked from the living room. I cheated, Mark said, voice shaking. I admitted that. I tried to fix it. What you did was different. I stared at him. You tried to fix it? Yes. You were texting her the entire time. His jaw tightened. You went through my phone again? That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because even then, he reached for the smallest crime he could accuse me of. Yes, Mark. I went through your phone. And I found out you blocked her old number in front of me, then kept talking to her with a new one. He looked away. I kept going. You told her coaching was for appearances. You told her I was fragile. You told her I didn't know how to let go. You let her call me pathetic, and you agreed. He said nothing. That was you trying to fix it? He rubbed both hands over his face. I was confused. No, I said. You were comfortable. His eyes snapped back to mine. You did this to punish me. Yes. The word landed between us like a glass breaking. I could have softened it. I could have said I was drunk or emotional or lost. All of that was partly true. But the whole truth was uglier. So I said it again. Yes. I did it to punish you. Mark's face twisted. So you admit it. I admit I wanted you to feel what I felt. You think this makes you better? No. Then what was the point? I looked at him for a long time. The point, I said, was that you built a secret life where both of us existed around you. Your wife at home. Your mistress waiting. You got to be wanted, pitted, forgiven, chased. You got to lie to both of us and still feel like the victim. I wanted to take one thing in that story that didn't belong to you. He stared at me like he had never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. You're cruel, he said. I nodded slowly. I learned from you. That was when he started yelling. He called me disgusting again. Then cruel. Then manipulative. Then unstable. That word made me stand up. Do not call me unstable, I said. He scoffed. You slept with my affair partner. And you told her I would fall apart if you left me. He froze. I stepped closer to the table. You told her I was fragile. You told her I was pathetic. You used me as an excuse to keep sleeping with her. So don't you dare stand in my kitchen and act shocked that I finally did something ugly. His face went red. My kitchen, he said. That was such a Mark thing to grab onto. The ownership. The control. The one word that could turn the argument away from what he had done. Our kitchen, I said. For now. He grabbed his keys off the counter. I can't even look at you. I said, that makes two of us. He left that night and went to Kevin's house. Kevin Johnson, his brother, was a carpenter and one of those men who hated drama unless it was happening to someone else. Mark told him some version of the story where I was the villain. I know that because Anna, Kevin's wife, called me the next morning. Anna was a chef, practical and blunt. She didn't waste time. She said, "Mark is here saying you cheated on him with Brenda Hill." I closed my eyes. Did he mention he was sleeping with Brenda first? There was a pause. No, Anna said. Did he mention he kept talking to her after we started marriage coaching? Another pause. No. Then he's giving you the edited version. Anna sighed. I figured. He's crying too clean. That almost made me smile. She said, "For what it's worth, I'm not defending what you did. But I also don't think he gets to show up here acting like a wounded deer." Thank you, I said, and I meant it more than she probably knew. By noon, Mark had started telling people. Not everyone. Just enough. His brother. A couple of friends. Maybe someone from work. The version was simple. His wife had cheated with the woman he used to have a mistake with. He was devastated. He had tried to repair the marriage, but I had gone too far. For about 6 hours, I let him have that version. Then Carol called me. "Amy," she said, "what happened?" I sat on the floor beside Buddy and Maggie, both of them pressed against me like they knew I was breaking. I told her everything. Not the polished version. Not the version that made me sound powerful. The whole awful thing. The hotel charge. The tablet. The coaching. The second number. Brenda's messages. Mark's replies. The wine bar. The apartment. The dinner. The explosion. Carol was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I understand why you did it." I started crying then, because I had expected disgust. But, she said softly, "I don't think you'll like yourself for it forever." That hurt worse than if she had yelled. "I know," I said. "No, listen to me. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because Mark's betrayal already took enough from you. Don't let your revenge become the only thing you remember about yourself." I wiped my face with my sleeve. "What do I do now?" Carol said, "You stop fighting him like a wounded wife and start protecting yourself like a woman who is leaving." That was the first clear sentence anyone had given me. So I did. The next day, I called in sick to work. I made coffee. I opened every account I had access to. I downloaded statements, copied tax documents, saved credit card records, and took screenshots of the messages I still had. The accountant in me finally had something useful to do with the pain. I did not empty our bank accounts. I did not destroy his things. I did not send Brenda's messages to his boss. I wanted to. I am not pretending I became saintly overnight. But I had already crossed one line, and I could feel how easy it would be to keep crossing more just to feel something. So I chose paperwork. It sounds boring, but paperwork saved me. I made folders. Mortgage. Credit cards. Insurance. Retirement accounts. Dogs. Utilities. Marriage coaching receipts. Hotel charge. Screenshots. Then I went to the St. Louis courthouse to ask about the filing process. That was where I met Nicole Scott, a courthouse officer. She was not my lawyer. She did not pretend to be. She just told me which window to go to, what forms I needed, and where I could find legal resources. She looked at my shaking hands as I held the forms and said, "Take your time. People rush when they're scared." I almost cried right there because it was the first kind sentence from a stranger that didn't require me to explain myself. I called a real family law attorney after that, one recommended by a coworker, and scheduled a consultation. I won't bore anyone with the legal parts, except to say that they were less dramatic than the emotional parts and somehow harder. Divorce turns heartbreak into forms. It turns betrayal into assets, dates, passwords, and signatures. Mark came home 3 days later to get clothes. I was ready for another fight, but he looked exhausted. Smaller. His anger had not disappeared, but it had settled into something colder. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom while I folded towels. "Did you file?" he asked. I started. He looked around the room. "So that's it?" I stopped folding. "What did you think was going to happen?" He swallowed. "I thought we'd talk." "We talked for months." "No, you performed forgiveness while planning revenge." I turned to him. "And you performed remorse while continuing the affair." He flinched. For the first time, he did not have a comeback. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said. I almost softened. That was the danger with Mark. His sadness still knew the way into me. But then I remembered every message. Every lie. Every time he let me feel crazy for needing reassurance. So I said, "I think you know exactly who you are. You just don't like being seen." He looked up at me. His eyes were red. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "That would be easier." He nodded slowly. "I hate what you made me feel," I said. "I hate that I still loved you while you were making fun of me. I hate that I did something terrible and a part of me still thinks you deserved it. I hate that even now, I want you to say something that makes this make sense." He whispered, "I'm sorry. And the worst part is, I think he meant it right then. But meaning it after the damage is done does not put the wall back up. It does not unwrite the messages. It does not make the person on the bathroom floor stand up clean." I said, "I know." He packed a duffel bag while I stood in the hallway with the dogs. Maggie whined when he walked past. Buddy watched him like he was waiting for Mark to come back inside and be normal again. Mark crouched and scratched Buddy behind the ears. He started crying. I had imagined that moment would feel satisfying. It didn't. It just felt like watching the end of a life I used to want. Before he left, he said, "Can I take them sometimes?" I said, "Not while you're staying with Kevin. Anna's allergic and their yard isn't fenced." He nodded. Okay. It was such a small defeat for him and such a small victory for me. The dogs stayed with me because they were safer, steadier, and already home. After everything that had happened, keeping Buddy and Maggie felt like holding on to the only loyal part of my marriage. Brenda blocked both of us a week later. Before she did, she sent me one final message. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I think I wanted to win until I realized the prize was Mark." I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't matter. Because it mattered too much. I didn't want a friendship with her. I didn't want a sisterhood forged from betrayal. I didn't want to turn what happened into some poetic story where 2 women escaped the same man together. Maybe that happens for some people. It did not happen for us. She was still the woman who slept with my husband while knowing he had a wife. And I was still the woman who slept with her to hurt him. There was no clean hero in that room. Over the next few weeks, people found out different versions. That is what happens when a marriage ends loudly. Everyone becomes a judge with incomplete evidence. My mother cried when I told her. Helen had wanted me to forgive him after the first affair. She had believed Mark's apology because she wanted to believe people could still be decent after doing indecent things. When I told her he never stopped talking to Brenda, her face changed. She said, "I told you to stay." I said, "Mom, you didn't know." "But I told you." I took her hand. He lied to all of us. My father, Gary, did not say much. He came over one Saturday and fixed the loose cabinet hinge Mark had ignored for 6 months. Then he checked my tires, cleaned my gutters, and left a pack of batteries on the counter because he said my smoke detector was probably dying soon. Before he left, he hugged me hard and said, "You come back from this. Not quick, but you do." That was the closest he came to a speech. Carol was the one who kept me honest. She did not let me turn myself into either a monster or a martyr. When I said, "Maybe I'm just as bad as him," she said, "No. But you did do something bad." When I said, "He deserved it," she said, "Maybe. But deserving pain doesn't mean pain makes you free." When I said, "I don't regret it," she said, "You might later." That's okay too. I needed that. I needed someone who loved me enough not to clap for everything I did just because I had been hurt. Mark tried to come back twice. The first time, he sent a long message about how we were both broken and maybe that meant we could understand each other better. I didn't answer. The second time, he showed up with flowers. I opened the door but left the chain on. He looked at the chain and gave a sad little laugh. "Really?" I said, "Yes. Really." He held up the flowers. "Can we talk?" "No. Amy." "No." He looked over my shoulder like he expected to see the life he used to have. The hallway. The dogs. The house. Me. "I made mistakes," he said. "You made choices. So did you." "Yes," I said. "And mine ended the marriage because yours already killed it." He looked down. I almost took the flowers. Not because I wanted them, but because old habits are stupid and grief is sneaky. Instead, I said, "Goodbye, Mark." Then I closed the door. I cried after. Of course I did. Calm victory is still allowed to hurt. The divorce is still moving. It is not final yet, but the direction is set. Mark is renting a small apartment now, one that doesn't allow dogs. I stayed in the house for now because it made the most financial sense, and because I was done being the one who moved around his chaos. People still have opinions. Some friends think I was iconic. They say I gave him the humiliation he earned. They tell the story like a revenge movie, with me walking away in sunglasses while the house explodes behind me. That's not how it felt. Other people think I lost my mind. They say revenge cheating is still cheating. They say I threw away the moral high ground. They say I could have left clean. They are not completely wrong either. That is the uncomfortable part. Everyone wants betrayal stories to have a clear shape. Villain. Victim. Justice. Consequence. But real pain is messier than that. Sometimes the victim does something cruel. Sometimes the villain cries in a way that sounds real. Sometimes revenge feels good for one night, then follows you into every quiet morning after. I am not proud in the way people want me to be. I am not sorry in the way Mark wants me to be. Both things are true. I regret that I let him drag me into the ugliest version of myself. I regret that when I finally had power, I used it to wound instead of simply walk away. I regret that Brenda became part of my story in a way I can never untangle. But I do not regret ending the fantasy. Because that is what our marriage had become. A fantasy Mark performed for me while living a different truth with Brenda. I was supposed to keep cooking dinner, going to coaching sessions, walking the dogs, smiling at family gatherings, and slowly shrinking myself so he could feel less guilty. I tried to forgive him. I tried to be graceful. I try to be soft. And he used every soft place in me as somewhere to hide the knife. Now the house is quiet. Quieter than I expected. Some nights it feels peaceful. Some nights it feels like the silence is judging me. Buddy sleeps at the foot of the bed, Maggie curls behind my knees, and I still wake up reaching for a man I am relieved is gone. That is the part nobody talks about. You can miss someone and still know they should never come back. Last week, I found the old hotel charge again while organizing documents for my attorney. Indianapolis. One night. One stupid line on a statement that cracked open my whole life. I stared at it for a while, then put it in the folder marked divorce. No crying. No shaking. Just a paper in a folder. That felt like progress. I don't know what I am yet. I am not the good wife. Not the innocent victim. Not the perfect revenge queen. I am just a woman who was lied to, tried to stay, found out she was still being mocked, and made one terrible choice that finally made it impossible to keep pretending. Maybe Mark lost the right to judge me the moment he kept humiliating me behind my back. Maybe I lost the right to call myself innocent the moment I decided to hurt him on purpose. Maybe both things can be true. So I guess I'm asking this, because I still don't know how to hold the whole truth at once. Was I completely wrong for what I did with Brenda, or did Mark lose the right to act destroyed by the ugliness he created?